Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Thunderstorm. I am Kaznaries. With me is the nameless guest,
Yo.
friend,
Yo.
and Sliver.
Heyo.
Today we have come here to ask and answer the question, what makes a good single-player game? That is a tough question to answer. I thought, easy topic. The more I thought about it, no, kind of fucking hard topic, actually.
Normally I like to try and make notes ahead of time, just to try and organize my thoughts going into it. And I actually struggled a lot with this one. It's very easy to discuss what would say make a good multiplayer game. It's very easy to discuss what makes a bad single player game. It's a little bit harder to figure out dial right in to what makes a good single player experience, in my opinion.
I mean, when you get down to brass tacks, two of my favorite single player games are Super Hot and Danganronpa. Like, what similarities do those two games have that I can say, like, definitively, like, I can point a bullet on it and say, yeah, this is what makes a great single player game. I don't think any of us can provide one particular thing that's like the golden bullet for every single game, but we can, of course, provide several corner cases that add that wonderful spice to the games that are real fucking good.
Well, in my opinion, I think that there is one thing that a single player game needs to do, and that is it needs to grip an audience of some kind. With a multiplayer game, you have the ability to get away with a lot more. If you have a mediocre multiplayer game, you can still achieve your goals provided the right group of people is playing that game. If you have a mediocre first-person shooter, for example, that game can still be enjoyable just by having a group to amplify that experience. A single-player game doesn't get that kind of luxury. You need to have something that can grab you in, pull you in. With the example of Super Hot, it has its unique gameplay, for example. Or with Danganronpa, it has, to my understanding, very entertaining characters. You don't need that as much with a multiplayer game in comparison. And if you really think about it, it might be why single-player games with big developers kind of fall to the wayside these days, where, hey, I can make a Call of whatever, and someone's going to play it. Someone's going to stream it. If I make a bad, mediocre, Souls-like, for example, and it's supposed to be a single-player experience, and it sucks, there's nothing that's going to save it. It's just going to be mediocre forever unless I spend way more money patching it that I'm never going to get back.
I think you make a really good point about a bad multiplayer game being a lot more forgivable than a bad single-player game. One notable experience comes to mind where we all fucking played Who's Your Daddy? That's a game that, under normal conditions, I would never purchase, but for the experience of fucking around with my friends to see just how bad it is, yeah, that's more enjoyable. It's more fun with more people. And when you're sitting there and you're getting and you boot up one day for Ched and you're getting shot from all sides and you die immediately and you're not having a good time, it is a lonelier experience, and it is a very negative one that is tough to continue.
Yeah, unless you're a psychopath, you're not going to be one day for Ched.
Come to think of it, I feel like in every single game, or rather in every single one of these thunderstorms, our nameless guest has to bring up Dark Souls. And even Dark Souls does have like a multiplayer element to it.
Yeah,
but
it does, although you can play a lot of those games without touching that at all. You can just unplug your Ethernet cable and it's still a perfectly good game.
And I still firmly believe that all the Soulsborne kind of stuff is a single player game. It just has a multiplayer component. I think that there is a difference between a single player game with multiplayer in it and a multiplayer game. No one will argue that GoldenEye is a multiplayer game.
Well, I mean, the main campaign, sure, but I think most people remember GoldenEye for being a multiplayer game.
What I mean is, like, that game, you know it for the multiplayer. It was really made around the multiplayer, even though I think that was kind of at the very end, but you get what I mean. Sonic 2, you look at that and you're like, yeah, it's a single-player game. There's two-player in it, but it's a single-player game still.
I think when I look at all of the games that I've really loved that are single player, one of, if not all of the games I play usually have a element of self-expression, and that's usually through its gameplay. An example of that would be in God of War. There's several different combos you can do, and there's several different like special attacks you can do, and you sort of have to like pick and choose which ones you like. I always found it funny looking at like gameplay of God of War, where every time I like, oh, I can't find the secret, I'd like find somebody playing Kratos with like a whole different move set than I did. I just think that's really cool that even though it is single player, you have that ability to give your player several different options that are
Creates
might
a
not
unique experience.
Yeah, and I mean, nameless guest, going through Neo the World Ends With You, I am using a very unoptimal set of pins right now.
No. Let me be fair. It's not that you're using bad pins. It's that you play the game horribly. It annoys me to no end.
Yeah, okay, but you really don't like the bus pin. You really don't like the drag shit around pin.
I hate the drag shit around. Mostly because it's hard to dodge while using them.
I'm really enjoying myself when I use the drag shit around pin. To put this into perspective, there's just a pin that whenever you press it, when you hold down left bumper, a random object will just appear in front of you and you can control it and just hit enemies with it. And like 1 out of 3 times, it's just a giant fucking tram that you can just smash into enemies. For me, I love that element of randomness. It's fun to me, and I know it is one of the reasons that I'm not getting the best scores, but I like that the game has so many options, and I can do that. Another great example of that would be Bravely Default. Holy balls. Every character has so many different options that you can do in combat when you combine different classes. I think playing the second game of that, and I'm going to explain this poorly, so you may feel free to jump in, because I know you'll want to. When you got the Wizard class in Bravely Second, the Wizard class is so interesting because then you can take the spells of almost any other class and like use them, verify them in different ways.
Yeah, you can augment them in various formats. You can take a single target spell to make it a multi-target. You can take your multi-target spell and make it a single target to make it more powerful. You can make a spell last several turns, so it'll just activate at the end of each turn randomly, kind of thing.
One of the funniest things I realized I could do is take the spell that reses the entire party that's usually a single target spell, and then cast that as a mist, and then every turn, if a party member died, they just come back up for 8 turns. I love those games for when I discover funny shit like that, like Samurai Pirates. The pirate has an ability that does ridiculous damage, but it eats up like all of your mana, and then you realize when you level up Samurai that you have an ability that your next attack that you use doesn't use any mana. So you use that ability, and then you just go ham with this crazy damage ability. It's not very strategic. Like, you just kind of devote one character to just spamming this crazy ability, but when you like realize you're like, oh, I can do that, it kind of makes you feel smart. And if not, at the very least, I just liked doing something that I figured out. And usually, like RPGs that give you tons of options but narrow it down, I really love those. Amori isn't as great at this, but you have characters that like learn so many spells at the beginning or like the mid game, and
You're only allowed to bring 4 at once.
You're only allowed to bring 4, exactly. So
in the end, everyone will choose like the 4 that they want, and thus it makes everyone's like loadout a little different.
Yeah, and by the end of the game, everyone kind of learns their ultimate abilities, so builds will inevitably homogenize. But there is a solid section of that game where I was like, I'm playing this game this way, and I really like the way I play this game, but I could see somebody doing a completely different strategy and having just as much fun. That does a lot for me. That adds replayability, and it allows players to get a little bit creative. And it's super cool.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting when multiple of us have played the same game, and then we all come to the table and we say, man, I played it this way and got a totally different experience, or I did this thing so differently than anyone else even thought of, or, someone played the game like a maniac and did something ridiculously stupid.
Yeah, somebody found some ridiculous exploit that let them just immediately KO everything in one turn.
Sliv fell down a ladder in Dark Souls for 3 hours. Or something crazy like that,
Whoa, I don't remember playing the game like that. I also haven't played Dark Souls. Someday I will play Dark Souls, I swear. People won't shut the fuck up about it, and it seems good.
Here's another good one to add to things a single-player game needs. Ease of access. I am very much, because Dark Souls reminded me of that, the PC version's kind of a little bit rough to get going with the, what was it, Prepare to Die or whatever?
Prepare to Die is pretty rough before you mod it.
Yeah.
The current remastered version is decent. Like, I've played the remastered Dark Souls on PC, no problem, and yeah, it worked perfectly fine. There's some issues, but not anything that really detracts overall. Like, some people dislike some, lighting changes and stuff. But it ultimately didn't bother me when I played through it. It was fine.
On that note, I also think there needs to be options in some games for I've played this series before button, so I can just forego all the tutorials, please. Mainly think of every new Pokemon game that comes out in the last 5 years. All of them have a bunch of shit that takes way too long, and it's like Sun and Moon in particular were really marketed towards people who played Gen 1 and stuff like that. There is a considerable amount of your fan base that does not need this. Who needs to be taught to fucking catch a Pokemon anymore other than the 5-year-olds? And I understand, of course, keep it in, fuck it. But just have an option that says, hey, have you ever caught a Pokemon before? Yes or no? Yes? Great, okay. Let's forego the tutorial and just get to the meat. Man, some games are fucking awful about that.
And I think that is a bad move. You don't have an option in there. I do think it's better to have a tutorial that you can't skip than no tutorial at all.
I mean, that depends on the game.
Depends on the game to an extent. If it's Super Mario Brothers and you need a tutorial on how to jump,
I was gonna say Super Mario Brothers. That one doesn't really need any tutorial. There's 2 buttons in that game. It's just pretty easy to figure out what you're doing.
But then you have people playing Cuphead that can't figure out double jump in the tutorial level. So maybe would you just need tutorials and everything?
That was the tutorial. It did tell them how to do it. That was a fundamental issue of problem solving more than anything else. But yeah, no tutorials. You can't over tutorialize. You can't under tutorialize. And there needs to be a point when tutorials end. People find it really weird when you get 80% of the way through a game and it throws another tutorial at you.
Yeah.
There needs to be a point in your game where you're like, the new mechanics have been introduced. This is the game. And some things are going to get more complex, maybe. You're going to learn new abilities. But we don't need to teach them to you anymore because they just fundamentally work with what's already there. So we don't need a whole tutorial for each one. There does need to be a point.
Double jump. Here's a 20-minute tutorial on how to double jump.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like the best games just sort of do that through their own game design usually.
Yeah, no, like a lot of
in Doom, you get a box that says you can now double jump, and then you look around you and you see a bunch of things that look that you like you could get to them with jumps, and you just have the player organically figure that out themselves.
Yeah, I was gonna say the original Portal is amazing at this.
Oh, for sure.
Portal 1 is the entire game is a tutorial for the most part, but at no point does it feel like one. Like, it gives you, like, the very first room in the game is just put a box on a button. And that effectively just tells you that that's what boxes are for, pushing buttons. It's like a really minor thing that no one should need to learn, but someone out there does need to learn it, but it doesn't have to stop for, like, an excessively long period of time and tell you how that works. If you know what you're doing, you can quickly just grab the put it on the button without any issue at all. And then every new mechanic that's introduced gives it to you in a very safe environment so that you can easily practice it before it like incorporates that into a larger challenge. It's a fantastic game in terms of tutorializing in gameplay. This extends to Portal 2. Portal 2 does this as well. Although I find Portal 2 will like introduce and teach you a mechanic, and then it'll give you like a challenging thing with that mechanic, and then it'll never use the mechanic with any other mechanics outside of, I think, the like multiplayer section of the game will actively use multiple mechanics in a row. But like typically you don't get like the big tractor beams and the heart light bridges at the same time. They just don't do that very often. It's kind of one of my bigger issues with that game is that they just didn't combine enough mechanics. We didn't get like hard light bridges and the gel at once in any puzzle in that entire game.
Segueing off of things that are hard. Wow, that was fucking horrifying. I think challenge is one of the few things that, like, when I really get down to fucking single player games that I've really enjoyed, there has got to be like an element of challenge. And usually that comes in the form of a really tough boss. I've never played through a game that I was really, really invested in and gotten my ass beaten by a boss and just given up. When I play through Super Meat Boy, I don't want to stop. I just want to keep going. And I think a good challenge that the game has like warmed you up to, you can lose sleep over that shit. Might not be healthy for you, but like some of my favorite gaming experiences have just been struggling for hours on something and then feeling that sweet, sweet satisfaction when you finally do get that fucking victory.
Or even when the light bulb turns on, you know? When you're trying to solve a puzzle and like you get the aha, that's how you do that. That is so rewarding. I think challenge is a way you can engage, right? I think adding challenges as you go along to make the game more engaging is really important, because you can have the best controls in the world, you can have the best movement in the world, the game can feel super fulfilling. If you can't engage and make either you care about the gameplay or care about the story or care about the challenge, it doesn't matter. Your game might as well control like crap, because you don't have anything to... You basically made an amazing mashed potato, but you don't have any meat.
I will say,
get down to the meat and potatoes.
Something I find funny about pretty much almost every game I've played, it's never the final boss that gives me the most trouble. It's always like some sub-boss at like the midway point, or like the little bit past the midway point, that has me on it for hours. I have yet to actually, I think, ever play a game where the last boss was actually legitimately the most difficult thing in the game. And I find a lot
of games hold back on the final boss.
Yeah.
Because at that point, like, the player's in this state of like, I'm almost done. I want to, finish it, and I want to see the conclusion.
Yeah.
And thus, they generally won't throw like the biggest thing at you, and they'll save that like huge challenge for like a post-game boss kind of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it doesn't necessarily not having the most difficult thing in the game be last isn't a bad thing, because some last bosses in themselves can just be like showcases for interesting story beats. I think immediately what comes to mind is the Metal Gear Solid 4 fight with Liquid. I was gonna say Liquid Chris, with fucking Liquid on top of the building. There's so much nostalgia in this hand-to-hand duel, and it's incredibly fun and entertaining to look at, especially if you've played through the series up to that point. But it's definitely not the most challenging part of the game.
Or another good example, Undertale spoilers.
Oh yeah.
The final boss of the pacifist route, you can't die for like a majority of that fight.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other fights before that are actually quite challenging, obviously not compared to other routes in the game, but that are quite challenging and way harder to get through.
You know, in hindsight, I think I might have to take that. If you do consider the last boss of the other route the last boss of Undertale, then shit, I guess Undertale might actually be the game with the most challenging last boss I've ever fucking played. I'd have to think about that one, actually.
I mean, that's a different scenario. I almost consider the Genocide run to be like post-game super boss thing. Most people do not do Genocide runs for their first run through.
That's true, of course.
I'm sure that the majority of Undertale runs is someone will play it, semi-normally, kill some people, spare some people.
Accidentally kill the dummy at the beginning because you don't know.
Yeah, stuff like that. And then they'll play it again and do pure pacifist. And then out of curiosity, they'll do Genocide. So it really is... That is more of like a post-game kind of super boss than anything.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like to see in single-player games, and I know this is a weird thing, but I like a sense of progression physically on the characters.
Okay.
But like also when you open up your menu, I love those. Like Majora's Mask has like both my favorite sense of progression character-wise and menu-wise, because if you look at like Link by the end of the game, he has this shield that is just so... Oh god, what emotion would you even put on that shield? Despair,
anguish.
It stares you in the face for the rest of the game after you get it. And then you look at this giant, monstrous item select screen, and it's all these masks that, for the most part, have like an interesting story or an interesting puzzle tied to them. And you like look through them, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the time I healed this soul, or I got that from the Great Fairy. I love just seeing a full inventory. Another example of like a character progression is Batman Arkham Asylum. I do like the little touches, like his cape being all marked up by the end of it. It's got a bunch of holes in it. He's got a bunch of scrapes on him. In The Last of Us 2, it's a bit more obvious. Samus usually comes out looking like a pimp by the end of most of her games, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, pretty much any Metroid game, you change your armor quite commonly.
And I just think that's really cool.
Progression is huge, and a lot of, like, in the single-player games that I like a lot of progression. I'm not the biggest fan of starting a game and ending the game at, like, the same power level.
Yeah.
Well, not just visually, I'm talking, like, everything. Yeah. I like to get more powerful throughout the game, or to get more tools throughout the game, because I think that's cool, and it aids in that earlier tutorialization thing a bit, because you can start them with, like, a base set, and then you give them more tools later, which expands their options, and because of that, you don't have to give them a huge like info dump at once as to how everything works, because you can give it to them in little bits throughout the game. In terms of, I don't know, like RPGs, everyone just likes seeing numbers get bigger. Like,
of course,
most people enjoy numbers getting bigger. It's a weird thing our brains do.
Big number good.
I feel like we've all been programmed to it though, right? Like if you play RPGs, like that's just a thing you see in every single game, and naturally number go bigger and hit that dopamine hit real nice.
Yeah, a bunch of 9s makes that dopamine in the back of my head just go whoop.
Actually, number getting bigger isn't just like an RPG thing. It's been there from the beginning of video games. There's always been score systems in early games too.
That's true.
Every game has always taught everyone that big numbers are good, generally speaking.
Yeah, get the bonus in the arcade game, or you get a bonus for clearing one of the arcade game levels.
Yeah.
Even Space Invaders is doing that, or like go right back to Pong. That's a multiplayer game. That's a multiplayer game. So discussion for another time.
Speaking, number get bigger in Pong is a good thing. You're right.
This is mostly a just me thing, but I actually like when a game does not have difficulty selection. Because whenever there is difficulty selection, I feel like I can always just lower it and like cheapen my experience, I guess. I kind of like being forced to play at the a higher difficulty. I like that there's a baseline difficulty that like everyone gets to play at. I don't know. I kind of like that for some reason. That may just be
No, I get it, because like a symptom of not having that is those games that you lose a bunch and then it says, wow, you suck ass. Do you want to lower your difficulty, buddy?
The worst feeling. The worst feeling is when the game asks you to lower the difficulty.
The worst, like the most demoralizing fucking text box in a video game I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Those need to be removed forever.
Honestly, some games are also way too quick to that punch. Where like, oh, I died twice, and all of a sudden it has a big thing flash on screen. Do you want the tutorial, like the Luigi to do it for you? You know,
just piss off. Yeah.
Mario, and like they'll have the golden cap that just wins the level for you. Yep. That's so lame.
Yeah.
I think you can disable that one somewhere though. I don't actually know for sure. But no, I kind of like that. I also just dislike going online and saying like, you know what, this game was okay. I wasn't like a big fan of it. And then like someone immediately goes, yeah, but did you play it on super hardcore? Yeah. I killed your family difficulty? I don't know. Like, it's like, no, I didn't play on that difficulty. Well, you didn't get the real experience. Of course you didn't like it. Like, I do hate that.
Or like you beat the game on normal, which is the default difficulty, and at the very end it just like cuts the ending and it's just like, haha, if you want the true experience, play through the entire game again on another difficulty.
I think it was Ghosts and Goblins that did that first, and that was fucking awful. If you're making different fucking difficulties for accessibility reasons, don't just say haha, fuck everyone who's playing easy. Like, that's just, I don't know, that just seems mean to me.
Yeah, especially if it's like a 15-hour game. Like 90% of people are gonna get to the end of that and be like, well, screw it, I've never seen I'm going to YouTube, I guess.
Going to YouTube, exactly, yeah.
And they're gonna leave at the end of it with a sour taste in their mouth because their experience was neutered because of a choice that the game gave them to make.
This next one is, I always say these are odd ones, but they end up not being odd ones.
No, your opinions aren't that unique, Kaz.
Okay, well, how about this? I like collectibles that actually fucking do things. I really hate, I'm going to use Ultimate Spider-Man as my corner case for this. There are 120 or 100 and something comic books in the world that you can just collect. And they just don't do anything, and sometimes they're on tops of buildings, sometimes they are on the sides of buildings, and sometimes they're just hidden for no reason, and there's no radar to find them, if I remember correctly, and there's no way to efficiently even pinpoint just like a general area where they are. Yeah. I really hate collecting those and then having no reward other than, I don't know, you get to look at artwork. I really like when I collect things like that, and then I get a tangible thing, or a tangible upgrade, or like a point or something that I can put into something.
Yeah, that again is not that weird, Kaz. You just want your time to be rewarded, like most people.
Yeah.
That's a thing that single-player games should probably avoid, which is big time wasters. In a lot of, like, multiplayer games, companies want to waste your time so that you'll spend money in order to speed things up. And I guess I can understand why they do that, even if I think it's kind of shitty. But in single player games, there's no need for that. You don't need to put some weird grindy nothingness. Mm. And in that particular case, I don't feel that particular case with the comic book, because you did get something. You got concept art and stuff like that from it. Like, it was a thing, and once you realize that the only thing you got was art, you should have realized, well, I don't really care about the art, so I'm just not going to collect them, and stopped caring about it.
Well, here's another case that I actually thought of for this. LA Noire has these little garages that you can find really nice cars in, and they're like based off different things. I don't know, different detective stories, whatever. They're like the fastest cars in the game. And you can go to one of these garages and get like a random car. And it is fun to drive them, but when you go to your next mission, the car disappears. So you just get your normal police cruiser. So I got to drive around in a car for like however much time, and then I don't get it anymore. It just kind of feels pointless. Like, I don't know. If I could maybe select the car from like any garage, then maybe I could see it, but
yeah, that feels a bit superfluous. Maybe if it was like, if you found the garage and unlocks that car and you can go in the menu and set it as your default car or something.
Yeah.
I could see that being kind of worthwhile and interesting. I think for the most part that feels pretty benign, kind of like just a pointless feature. But
well, it's for the achievement and platinum bait.
Yeah, that's also
true.
That's
why they do it.
But no, I'll agree that generally speaking, everything you do in a game should like contribute some way towards like something. Like collecting, getting a collectible should either progress the game or give you access to like a power up or something in some capacity.
And I mean, when developers do that, like it makes us see more of the world that they created. Like, yeah. I feel like it's only a good thing on both ends that that the player feels like they saw more of the world that you took how many hours of an entire team of game designers to make.
Another good example, going back to, you mentioned Batman Arkham Asylum earlier, it does having MacGuffins that are engaging but not part of the main content down pat with the Riddler trophies.
What were the rewards for the Riddler trophies again? I honestly forget what you got from them.
It's been a long time since I played the game. Isn't it how you got the case tapes of the different criminals that are in the game and stuff?
Okay, maybe. It gives you some background lore to the game. That is an interesting reward.
And it is cool. A challenge that is introduced through the main story where the Riddler tells you that he's hidden them throughout the facility.
Yeah, collectibles, rewards, just anything you do in a game should generally reward you well. You shouldn't have to go through like some kind of arduous process and get nothing in the end. The time reward system kind of idea needs to be well thought out. You also can't put like something absolutely amazing behind something that's like too long of a process to get, because then it just feels like a annoying chore. Even if the end reward is good, it doesn't feel worth it.
Yeah, and at that point you have to ask yourself, wow, 99% of people are just never going to experience this piece of content because we made getting to it impossible.
Yeah. What's the fucking point?
Single-player games are generally the best vehicle for story-based experiences. Whereas multiplayer games can do story-based experiences, but because you're generally playing them with other people and you're in like, let's say, a voice chat with your friends while you're playing it, is a very like different feel to it. You don't get as like invested in like the emotions and the characters that are going on when you're, chatting with your friends in a voice chat. It doesn't hit the same.
I want you to continue with your point, but just to go with that, Final Fantasy XIV has mandatory points where you have to get a whole group of people. And if it is your first time doing like a one particular dungeon at the end, the Praetorium, and you are just surrounded by a bunch of people in frog suits while the big bad of the game is telling you how much he's going to kill you and destroy the world or whatever the fuck his plan was, it feels incredibly fucking immersion breaking.
Yeah. Although I will say with Final Fantasy XIV, generally speaking, most people in that game are really nice about you watching the story content. Because there is story content in group content, and they're very nice about just letting you do that. Most people will not rush it. Some will, because it's a multiplayer game and some people are assholes, but, whatever.
Yeah, I think... I don't know, yeah.
It's kind of the exception.
So, single-player games are great, are, like, the best vehicle for storytelling experiences. And not to say that, like, a single-player game really needs a story to be good. To be fair, basically everything we said, it doesn't actually necessarily need... It doesn't need collectibles to be good. That's just a really nice thing to have, and we like it. Yeah. I do like a good story, but I've also played a variety of single-player games that have basically no story. Or I don't even know the story a lot of the time, and I didn't really care.
Or like the story gets relegated to the instruction manual or the box.
A lot of old games are like that, right? Like, you play like the original Super Mario Brothers. I don't know what the heck is going on there. It's just like a basic premise of princess is kidnapped, go save her. There's nothing else in there story-wise, and it's a fun single-player game.
There are a whole bunch of bubs who are assholes, and their entire existence is just to tell you to fuck off.
Right.
Wily make bad robots. Kill bad robots and stalk Dr. Wowie.
Well, until you get to like Mega Man X, where they like to expand that story considerably.
Even in the mainline games, they start having story, like the opening cutscene explaining what's going on.
Yeah, it changes up a little bit, but like you're never playing Mega Man for the next story beat.
But no, stories are like everyone loves stories. It's a thing that humanity just really likes. So there have been games that I've played almost exclusively for its plot. Like at a certain point, I just kind of got tired of gameplay and just tried to blast through it as fast as possible to hear what the plot was. Because I got a little tired of what the gameplay was, and I just kind of wanted to know what the story was. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I enjoyed that story and moved on.
I love it when I'm playing a story-based game that has cosmetics and items you can pick up, and then MC gets like fucking sliced across the face, but you're wearing the giant fucking happy face mask, so you can't see like anything that's going on.
Well,
fuck that shit.
That's your fault for putting on the giant fucking like happy face mask.
Your own decision to break your own immersion there, boss.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy watching the very serious scenes while my characters are essentially wearing mascot outfits. That is hilarious in a lot of games. I generally do that on a second playthrough kind of deal.
You see, I'm kind of dumb sometimes. I'm like, oh, everything's been fine so far. Now, if I put on this mask, and then, oh no, something critical just happened. Whoopsie doopsie.
I like the best armor in the game just looks hideous.
I went into the gamer feast using the shitty sun hat and hula skirt and no shirt. That
nice
cutscene, it wasn't ruined for me, but oh boy.
It would have been ruined for me.
Anyway, just delete that because half the audience, well, nobody who watches that will understand that reference.
Well,
anyway,
it's staying in. It's the gamer feast.
We're
talking a lot about multiplayer game here, but like everyone I have mentioned, oh yeah, have they gotten to the gamer feast? They know exactly what I'm talking about immediately, even though no one understands why it's called that.
Oh, I suppose with the giant exodus into Final Fantasy, more people would know what the fuck that is. So,
yeah. The other thing is a story can, because you mentioned a story can be what keeps you motivated to finish a game, and I feel like, sadly, a lot of RPGs in particular are bad for this, where the gameplay will be almost an afterthought. It'll be the most bare bones. You have a healer, a tank, and you have a couple damage dealers or whatever, and you go across fantasy world and fight the same enemies over and over again. You have to grind, and it's the same kind of spells. It's basically you're playing like an early Final Fantasy gameplay wise, but it has a really good story, and it always kind of like, I'm not an RPG guy, which hurts it, but I kind of hate that there are so many games that are just like, well, we have an awesome story, so we don't really have to care about really changing trends with the gameplay.
I bought a game named Record of Agrest War exclusively because of its story hook, which was that you are a guy in wartime, and then you seduce one of 3 women, and then you have a kid with them, and then you go into the next chapter, and the kid is the main character, and it continues on for 4 chapters. I really liked that hook, but the game was dog shit. It was some of the worst strategy. It is the worst strategy RPG I've ever played, because its tutorial was garbage and didn't explain enough. But I kind of just put the game on auto and was a little bit hooked on its story until it came to a point where my interest in the story didn't outweigh how much of a bad time I was having outside of the story. So absolutely a story is important for selling your game and being a part of a great game. Although this was not a great game. Holy fuck.
But it's a good example of where things can go wrong.
Yeah. I spent like fucking $60 on that game.
There needs to be a level of balance. You can't just have an amazing story, but your gameplay is so bad that it's almost not worth it. And you can't have a terrible story. You can have no story, but you can't have a really bad story, but good gameplay, in my opinion.
I mean, Rin, so you're saying that, like, it needs, like, a really good story, but it can't have, like, total dog shit gameplay. Is that what you're...
Yeah.
Except that Pathologic exists, which is the complete antithesis to that statement. The game that only has a good story and actively tries to piss you off with its gameplay.
That is an incredibly specific corner case, though.
I know, that is so, like... That game asks the question, do video games need to be fun?
Yeah.
Because it's not. I've never played it. I don't plan on playing it.
I have for like 6 seconds. Pathologic 2 runs horribly, and it is a really fun game to look up videos about, but I don't think I'm ever going to fucking play it because I don't like having a bad time. And that game is just having a bad time all the time.
At the end of the day, everything we talked about just comes down to immersion, honestly.
Well, of course.
That's not even true. I'm okay with things being very immersion breaking. It doesn't bother me in the slightest.
It could break immersion, but you have to be able to get into it, I think. A single player game, like, you almost need to be able to just sink your teeth into something.
You guys aren't talking about immersion. You guys are more talking about it being, like, gripping. Or interesting and enticing enough to keep you going. Immersion is a different thing. Immersion is where you, like, kind of, like, forget that you're playing a game and stuff like that.
I mean, you could get immersed in gameplay. I feel like
most people, when they use immersion in terms of gameplay, are talking about what I'm referring to. So I just want to keep terms straight. Because when I hate people who talk about immersion in games, because I don't need to be immersed in my game experience.
Yeah, but I was gonna say something about the game does need to immerse you. There needs to be like a sliver of that, either of that chunk, either the world or its story or its gameplay. There has to be something that kind of makes you forget about everything else for a little while.
I would call that gripping more than anything, but yeah, okay, whatever.
We're arguing semantics.
I agree with you, but I would use a different term because I just don't like that term.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Because whenever I hear immersion, I hear about people talk about like realism and stuff, and I don't want my games to be realistic. Actually,
Bubsy 3D changed my life.
Looking forward to the last 30 seconds of whenever I do a Bubsy 3D video where I talk about how I'm a different person for it. But I get, like, honestly, there is a reason that a lot of my videos end that way, where I'm talking about a game that I really enjoyed. It was gripping to me. It left a mark on me.
Will say when a game is that good, there is a feeling that you get where it's like the world cannot continue until I fucking beat this game. I cannot think about anything else until I get to the conclusion either of its story or its final boss, or I've met that final challenge.
Dude.
There have been so many games, and it's not just games like Doom. Danganronpa in particular was one of those games where it's like, I am going to go home and I am going to experience this story as soon as fucking possible. Sorry, Ren, continue.
I remember someone convinced me to try Phoenix Wright, and I locked myself in my room and just played through the entire first game pretty much in one go, other than eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom. Because I just got like super into it and just went through that game and enjoyed every minute of it. And
insert the mom yelling, "You're shitting yourself."
There's been a few games where when that happens, it's kind of awesome, where you just... Because unlike our unnamed guest, where he can kind of do whatever, he can kind of pick a game and power through it regardless, it feels like. It doesn't happen too often for me.
Oh yeah.
But when I get into something, I get into it.
I mean, that's I think in microcosm, that's why we play fucking video games. That's why I play video games anyway. Well, it's a reason, but it's a really fucking big reason. I want that high. You know? I need it. I'm an addict.
That feeling when you finish a really good game and you just sit there and you're like, damn. I do like that feeling, but I also kind of hate it because at that point I'm like, what do I do next?
Yeah.
Do you guys ever get like post game depression where like you beat something and you wish that there was more of it?
Yeah, I just described it.
Yeah, I know, but like I'll actually get like bummed out. Like I'm like, wow, this is it. You know, I'm not like, these characters are awesome, but this is the end of the series, so I'm never going to see them again. And I'm never going to play another game in this series. The series is done. Or this game is done.
I think in Aramori Thunderstorm, one of the things I said was, fuck, there's never going to be another game like this. Or there probably won't ever be a game that does what this game does as well as it does it. But there will be people that try. And
for sure.
I guess that in itself is admirable.
Yeah, I think we both hit that kind of feeling after Amori. It was a really good game.
Yeah.
That did give me that kind of feeling of like, what do I even play next kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way when you beat a game?
It's the worst feeling. I kind of sit down in the corner and look at the wall because there's nothing left to do in my life.
I feel like we went across the entire spectrum of like, we went from like, we got our unnamed guest who's like, oh, what am I going to do next? To Kaz is like, oh yeah, you know, I kind of feel similar. And I get kind of bummed out and Sliv breaks.
Straight to crippling depression.
It's like, oh
but
no,
it is true.
Game's
like,
over. TV series is over. It's like, oh no, I just put like 50 hours into this. And now my existence is pain.
Yeah, I love this thing. I want more. I guess one of the best things a single player game could do is at the end you wish that you had more of it.
It's like, hey, buddy boy, you want a New Game Plus? Here, have New Game Plus. Play the game all over again.
I think that's something that games do so much. I mean, who am I kidding? Of course, there's going to be movie critics and music guys and art people that are like, I have enjoyed this piece of art. Oh God, will there ever be anything like it? With a video game, you've not only experienced that story, you've had to fucking deal with the challenges of beating it. And you've sunken in so much fucking time usually for a good game. Anyway, that's my essay on why games are the highest form of art. Objectively.
It's too bad that like artists like us are depressed. Oppressed?
We are oppressed. We're gamers.
Also, we're artists?
Gamers.
What?
Yeah.
The most oppressed group in the world. Insert the clip.
Which one?
Yeah,
Best group in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Gamers.
Gamers.
It's clear that Sliv has Mario Paint on the mind. Artists. Or like Music Maker Studio 2002 for PlayStation 2.
Higher.
I don't know. All of you have made a stage in Smash Brothers.
That's technically true.
So we're technically level designers, if you really think about it, guys.
Man, between this and talking about Pathologic, I don't know how much more pretentious we can all get. Let's get to the next thing, please.
Hey guys, how about single-player games that are like just building games? Because the developer doesn't want to build a game, so they built a game about building a game. Do it yourself, asshole.
I wouldn't call those single-player necessarily.
Yeah,
you're thinking about like Mario Maker, which I would say is mostly I guess more of like a community experience as opposed to a multiplayer experience. I wouldn't directly call it like, this is a classically single player game.
Especially considering a lot of what comes out of that game is just what other people have made. It's not.
Yeah.
Most people don't buy Mario Maker 2 for the single player campaign.
I bought Dreams for the single player campaign. I haven't played Dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Play?
Yes, play Dreams.
For some reason, I thought you were talking about Dreams, Nights into Dreams.
No, I wasn't talking about Nights into Dreams. I was talking about Dreams for like PlayStation, the one where you make games.
Yeah.
Hey, Nights in the Dreams is a pretty good single player experience.
Nights in the Dreams is good.
It's something you could never get you could never have a multiplayer Nights in the Dreams. Or you could. It would just be really weird.
Alright, I know what we're doing. That's our next project. ThunderClub presents ThunderClub into Dreams.
None of us have the game development savvy. We just talk about games.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, single player games. Back to the topic, I guess.
I'm out. I'm out. I've exhausted my list.
My problem with this topic is just what makes a single player game is the same thing that makes pretty much most games good. There's a few exceptions, obviously, where like a single player story is probably more important than in a multiplayer game. We want games to look nice. Like I personally, I love a good art style in a game. Do I value that more in a single player game? No, not really. I like that in both my single player and multiplayer games. I love a good art style and decent looking visuals. So
I mean, who doesn't?
Exactly.
Yeah. You can't. Once again, you can have the best playing game in the world if it looks like mud, and unless that's its gimmick is that it looks terrible.
I mean, even if it is the gimmick, who is that even going to attract to play it?
I don't know. It'd be cool if you had a platformer game where it starts off looking really bad, and then as you complete more levels, it starts to look more and more cool.
Okay, well. Sure, and an idea, if the idea is to have it visually change, then I could see that. But if the entire game looks like shit all the time, then it kind of feels like you're kind of resting on artistic fucking pretentiousness. Oh, it looks bad on purpose, guys. Why won't everyone play it?
To be fair, I put things like graphics actually very low. I can accept a game that looks pretty bad as long as everything else about it that I value more, such as I don't know, its gameplay or story is of a high caliber. I can live with something that looks subpar as long as not some. Well, Half-Minute Hero looks good.
Actually, yeah, it does for sprite work for sure.
The sprite work is an art of itself that's a bit dying right now. Because sprites look good. I like sprites. I wish there were more games that had high quality, interesting sprites. Unfortunately, most sprite-based games are like indie works, and they purposely go for like a really bad sprite style.
They go for
a lot of the
8-bit,
time,
or even like less than 8-bit sometimes.
There was a game on my Steam list that like I liked. It was like called Sword and Sorcery or something. I forget. That has like I don't really like its pixel art. Like the arms are basically just a straight line of pixels, all one color. It's like not interesting at all. I'm not a big fan of its style, but I did like enjoy my time in that game. Not that I remember like a second of it. It's been so long since I played it. And it just felt like the art was being lazy more than it was on purpose, I guess. So yeah, pixel art is cool when like decent effort is put into it. That's why a lot of like older game, like I don't know, SNES pixel art can actually look really nice because they were doing the best they could with a limited capability. Whereas now when people go to pixel art, they're like, we want it to look not as good as we can make it. They could easily make, well, not easy, because pixel art is actually difficult, but they could make really nice, high quality pixel art. They just don't, because that's not the style they're going for.
Like,
and I'm not sure how much I like it.
It still boggles my fucking mind that Donkey Kong Country looks as good as it does on the SNES.
Yeah, that game looks really good for the level of technology that could work on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff from that era of games where you could take the pixel artwork or the digitized artwork and you could frame that and put it on your wall. Like, it looks that good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, like, limitations can breed, like, creativity and innovation and stuff in order to create some really great stuff. But in, like, modern day stuff, there's less limitations when it comes to pixel art, and there's just self-imposed limitations on what they want it to look like, which is somewhat unfortunate, but whatever.
And of course, like, manpower and...
Yeah, most indie games are done by very small teams that I don't expect them to have, like, amazing stuff, but it could be better. There's some where it feels like they're aiming really low for, like so they can say it's art, but it's really just to save time. Graphics are an interesting beast, but I also don't care about them that much, ultimately. Again, as long as gameplay and story is good, I can forgive something not looking particularly exceptional.
Yeah, I think out of everything we've talked about, graphics come down to being more subjective than anything else. Because everyone's going to have a different opinion on how a game looks. For the most part, with exceptions, obviously, a lot of people will agree if a story is good or bad. There's always exceptions to that rule, but...
Yeah, there'll be a general consensus.
I will... Yeah, I mean, graphics being objective is absolutely true. Like, I will not play Octopath Traveler because I really hate those sprites on that 3D plane. I don't know why my brain hates it, but I really dislike that plane of elevation. My mind just says no. But
See,
I'm sure
I actually kind of liked that about Octopath.
Exactly.
Octopath I had other issues with, primarily in its like level structure, basically. But
I'm sure the gameplay and most of everything else is fine in that game. Like, it's a highly rated game.
You know, I think the pixel art in it is really nice. If you ignore the 3D thing, if you just look at the pixels themselves, the sprites themselves, it looks really good. But I kind of like its weird blending of 3D and 2D. So that's a very subjective take. But it looks like they're going to do something similar for Triangle Strategy. Terrible name.
Fuck right off with that name.
I mean, that's a work in progress, but so is Octopath Traveler, so who knows?
Don't get me wrong, there are definitely modern pixel art games that look amazing. Sonic Mania is a good example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think that's the one area, that and music is where a lot of people can have more debate than, like I said, the story or, to an extent, the gameplay. Some people just might not vibe with the gameplay, but there's still generally the consensus of, yeah, it plays good.
Yeah, visual aesthetics and Yeah, music. I didn't even think about music. That's so subjective. I also probably will never buy a game for its music. Like, if a game has really good music and that's like all it's got for it, I'll pick up its soundtrack, but I won't pick up the game itself, kind of thing.
Yeah, or like, I will say there have been a couple times where I hear a song from a game and then I look into the game more because it sounds awesome. And I'm like,
That's
hey,
fair.
I like the sound of this. I'm going to look at the game now.
It can definitely create a sense of interest, but it's not like an end-all be-all of the game kind of thing.
Yeah.
I bought Guilty Gear XR just because of its soundtrack. Well, I mean, I did watch a bunch of videos about the story, but the soundtrack was definitely a component of that. I do like hearing good music while I get my ass beat online. Strive's soundtrack is just as good. Holy fuck. But that's not a single player game. How did we go so wrong?
It's one of those. It is a good example, though, of a game that is definitely multiplayer, but has a single player component.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't?
It literally doesn't.
I figured it had
maybe arcade.
some sort of story.
It has arcade mode. Its story mode is literally just a movie.
Yeah,
it's not
a movie.
Game.
It's a 4-hour movie. Which is actually really incredible that they just did that.
Arguably not a good single player experience.
No, generally fighting games aren't. There's a few fighting games out there that have some like interesting single player modes that are kind of fun, but for the most part, you're gonna get a fighting game to play with other people. So,
single player aspects that are really cool to us. Absolutely anything else.
Are the controls tight? That makes or breaks the game for me. If it controls like garbage, the game might as well not have been developed in the first place.
Or rather, it needed more time in the oven.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's...
Like, the game can be, like, the greatest thing ever. But if, like, moving around feels like I'm on an ice rink when I'm not on an ice rink, or there's significant delay, it really fucking sucks. The controls need to be good and tight for the genre that it is.
I do think there are some corner cases where it is kind of okay. Like, everyone calls the jumping in Little Big Planet floaty, and it is. It's incredibly floaty. If you actually go through, like, all of the story levels, it only takes a couple levels to, like, get that floatiness. Yeah. Mega Man 1 is a bad time every time I boot it up. It always feels wrong when Mega Man stops 2 steps after I stop my input. But I always get used to it every time I play that game. Because I ain't no bitch.
Or a lot of early 3D platformers have that classic 3D platformer symptom of this character moves like an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Mario 64.
Yeah.
Like,
God, Mario 64 is really tough to go back to every single time.
It's an amazing game, but games are difficult because a game aging badly isn't because of the game itself. It's because of everything around it has changed. So Mario 64, it created a genre essentially. There were 3D platformers before that, but I argue Mario 64 really cemented what came afterwards. But obviously now it's a little bit harder to go back to. It's not as timeless as Mario 1, for example.
There were so many times in my race to the finish clips where it's like, I don't really need to practice all that much. It's just Mario 64. And like, there's like several points during that 20-minute run that like I do like I don't know, I just fall off platforms for no fucking reason, or I just glitch off of things. Or I just don't end up where I want to be after a jump because it just feels so alien to me after all these years of progress.
Yeah.
It didn't click for me for like the first 30 minutes that it wasn't Odyssey. And I kept trying to do Odyssey shit even though I was holding an N64 controller. But that's just a me thing.
That sounds like a little bit of a you thing.
It's like, kind of like, it is kind of a different topic, but yeah, like a single player game, I think, is a little bit more susceptible to the ravages of time. Once again, a multiplayer game that's aged badly is probably still going to be enjoyable with friends. You can still,
for sure.
not that the original games aged badly, but you can play that multiplayer with people, and it's a lot of fun. I don't know, I would argue Super Mario Kart's aged badly, but you can have fun playing it with other people. And some of it's being able to set aside modern things, like with Mario 64, you get used to it after a while. But man, if you're young and you're just getting into games, and you're like, oh man, I hear all this stuff about Mario 64, and you play it for the first time, I imagine some people aren't going to get it. Luckily, I think we've kind of passed that now, where a lot of games that have, probably after the really early 2000s, you could probably go back to, and a lot of them haven't aged as badly as some of the late 90s offerings, as awesome as some of those games are.
I just sort of thought of it now, but there is, for some single player games, there is just sort of like a fun in playing an incredibly outdated game that you know is just like, you could be playing something released today that's leagues better, or you could spend several hours grinding wolves in Earthbound Zero and experiencing a relatively lackluster story now by today's standards, but kind of just playing it just because, not even bragging rights, but like just kind of cuz. Like, Sliver, you played through the original Dragon Quest, right?
Yes, I did.
Why? And that's not even like a joke question. Like, why'd you do that?
I needed something to do.
I don't know. I guess for me, there's
that,
just like
and I
a
played the mobile
novelty
version where it was, not as bad as on NES because it had, quality of life improvements.
I kind of see where you're coming from, though.
There's a novelty to it. There really is like a specific kind of novelty to it that I've never really gotten from anything else. I don't know.
You're experiencing that point in history, in a way.
Yeah.
If you're playing Sonic R, if I play Sonic R, I am experiencing a game from the mid-90s that was kind of mediocre.
Oh, yeah.
If Sonic R came out right now, I don't have any reason to care.
Unplayable. Absolutely.
Wait, so
but because you have the context of the time it came out in, it changes it a bit. It's similar to how like a game can become unplayable over time. Other games, in a way, you can have a different level of appreciation for as a. Well, it's nostalgia. It's some of it's nostalgia.
You're telling me you're not playing Sonic R just to try and figure out how to write a new creepypasta about the Tails doll?
Uh-huh.
No, plenty of people have done that. I don't need to add to that mess.
Well, do it again.
I mean, for you it's nostalgia. For me, like playing Earthbound Zero, like I don't think I even played Mother 3 by that point. Like I just said, okay, what's like a really old ass NES game? Oh, here's a game that like has a really weird history about releasing in the West. That's like the first game in the series of a game that's gotten a bit of a cult following. Fuck it, let's do it. In that particular case, actually, the story of actually playing that game for me might have been more interesting than playing the game, because my mother had grounded me for an entire year at that point. So my only console I had access to was my iPod Touch. And I ran an emulator off of the iPod Touch and used my Wiimote as a fucking remote to play this game. And I would carry around my iPod Touch and this giant speaker that would charge it. And that would just be like the one, I guess really the only reason I played this fucking game was because I literally had nothing else to do. But it was really satisfying, even knowing that a lot of the things that were in that game were incredibly outdated, and the story isn't even all that great, but it
still managed to find a way to grip you.
Yeah, for sure. Even if it was for my own circumstances.
And with that, we're going to wrap things up. As always, if you have anything you want to add, feel free to let us know in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. You know what? We probably missed something. If you enjoyed what you saw today, consider throwing a subscribe or a like. Check us out on Twitter at twitter.com/THNDRCLUB. Or, if you want, we have a Twitch, twitch.tv/ThunderClub. I'm Rin, and with me has been Kaznarius.
Uh-huh.
Our unnamed guest.
Bye.
And Sliv.
Good night, everybody.
And I thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Oh,
see you next time.
Is over.